What is up, everyone? It is the Mad King Paradox S here, bringing you a Pokemon Sun and Moon theory. Now, it is November 12th, currently. So, yesterday, we just got new Coral scan leaks, revealing 2 Ultra Beasts, 2 Z moves for the starters, and we also got a new Pokemon that wasn't a part of the original Dex leak. Now, a lot of people assume it's a final Ultra Beast. Some believe it to be MARSHADOW. I personally believe it to be MARSHADOW. Now, I may be wrong. I know there's been another leak, or maybe even 2 possible leaks, I don't know, but I don't want to look at those. So, none of the information I'm going to be giving has anything to do with those. So if what I say is disproven by what those say, then, oh well, I'll find out later. But basically, a lot of people are given the idea of the 3rd installment, and what MARSHADOW represents is Eclipse, which, for the longest time, I believe that as well. Part of me still believes it because it makes sense. But there is another thing that it could be. He could represent Mars. Now, his name is MARSHADOW. That part is obvious. And before I continue now, I'm going to upload, if I figure out how, a picture of it right here. Alright, now, given that picture, that is who I believe MARSHADOW to be. Again, I could be wrong, that could just be a final Ultra Beast, I don't know. But right now, I'm going to say it's MARSHADOW. Now, going off the thing that I believe it is Mars and not an eclipse, stems from something that I just found out recently that got me thinking. I have been looking into Sun and Moon theories and all that for the past few months now, because I think they're interesting. I love hearing people's theories. Hell, I was watching the Lockstin and Noggin theory series that they've been going on about this being the end of the Pokemon series for this section every so often. And that kind of led me into this theory in a way, because I did look into it on the same lines. But from what I know, MARSHADOW, again, a lot of people believe him to be the Pokemon equivalent of an eclipse because it makes sense. There's the sun, the moon, and then one that oversees both of them is an eclipse. Makes sense. But lest we forget that it is said that Zygarde is also going to be a part of this game as well. And Zygarde has nothing to do with the sun or the moon. He is the Pokemon embodiment of order. So, he usually presides over Xerneas and Yveltal, the Pokemon of life and death. So, taking that into consideration, I believe Mars to be even more substantial than an eclipse. And I have my notes here about why, so I will be looking down every so often. Forgive me, I'm not good at remembering things off the top of the head, like people who have seen my videos before. I tend to flub facts, or forget something right as soon as I need to remember it. So I will be looking down, and that'll be that. Now, starting off in real-world time, on Mauna Loa Volcano in Hawaii, there is a program that has been set up there called SMARS, or Simulated Mars. And what it is, it's a compound at the Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation Center, or HI-SEAS for short. And it is a center where scientists stay there, and what they're doing is they're using the environment and the conditions and simulating how it would be to live on Mars. They do everything from wearing suits while going outside to simulate being in a full-on astronaut garb. Oh, I just forgot the word. See, I just forgot the word. They make messages take longer to reach them because when you're up in actual Mars, messages will take a certain amount of time in order to get there. So they simulate that as well. They simulate living conditions, renewable resources that they have to accommodate themselves with, and everything. Any and everything that will happen when we send people to Mars, they simulate here in Hawaii, where the Alola region is based. And I do not believe that to be a coincidence. Also, Mars has been on the world people's mind for roughly about 60 years now. And if you look back, many science fiction writers have written about Mars. There have been many television series about Mars. There have been many scientific papers written about Mars. And as of right now, 2016, there are plans to send people to Mars within the next 2 decades. That is not a lot of time at all, and Mars is on people's minds. So, taking that into account, what else do we know about it? Well, there is a flag for Mars that has been made. A flag based off of the series of books called from the Kim Stanley Robinson series called Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars. And the series talks about terraforming the planet from a red barren wasteland to a green life-giving land, and then eventually a blue land for land and sea and prosperous life. And so a flag was created based off of that. There have been other flags created as well, but this is the primary one I want to talk about, where it is a flag that is red, green, and blue. Now, what else in Pokemon is red, green, and blue? The 3 original games launched back at the beginning of series. Pokemon Red version, Green version, and Blue version. And every so often, you do see yellow affiliated with Mars. Red, blue, green, and yellow. So I don't think it could be a coincidence that the colors that usually represent Mars are also the colors that are based on the 4 original Pokemon games for Generation 1. It could be a stretch, but I figured it would be something worth noting regardless. So, those colors are in mind. Now, there was another thing, real world wow, I cannot talk today. There are other issues that people have with Mars in the real world as well. One of which I thought was a little bit curious regarding Sun and Moon soon to come out. And that is, who owns Mars? There are 2, well, there's more than 2, but there are 2 primary ideas for this. There is one where it is privately owned companies that own Mars. And when I think of a privately owned company when it comes to Sun and Moon, I think the Ether Foundation. They're a privately owned company. They're doing things outside of the public eye. So, there's that. And then, conversely, there is extraterrestrial liberty. And what that means is you completely scrap all laws, regulations, and so forth from any country, any people, any group on planet Earth, and Mars becomes its own thing. They make their own rules, and they do things the way they want to without previously upheld laws for them to follow. Who does that remind you of? Why, Team Skull, nonetheless. Team Skull are doing that in the Alola region right now. They have broken off from the rest of Alola and are making their own society with their own rules. Now, seeing as how both the Ether Foundation and Team Skull both have differing views in the Alola region, and they fit somewhat well with this idea of how people are going to be handling themselves and handling things between Earth and Mars. I think, again, I do not believe that to be a coincidence. It fits too perfectly for me to just believe, oh, it just so happened to be similar. Okay. Nextly, there's a series going on, or soon to be going on the National Geographic channel called Mars. And before I continue, no, I haven't heard a word from them. Unlike other people who are discussing it, they have nothing to do with this video in general. I just can't help but notice that Mars is getting a lot more public attention recently than it has in the past while, with, again, plans to go there in the next few decades, an entire series dedicated to it on television, and so on and so forth. Again, little notes that I just want to be made aware of. Now, going from physical, real-life things to more ideological and philosophical things, there are some other things that I actually looked up a little while ago, and I wanted to see that, because all the things I just said, although do fit in a way, mean nothing if there's no symbolism behind it or ideas to push it further. So, I actually went and I looked up how Mars is seen as symbolically and things like that. I also looked up how it is alchemically, because, again, a lot of people are talking about the Alola region's connection with alchemy. And alchemy and astrology do go hand in hand, and Mars, being a celestial body, does fit into both of them. So I looked it up, and what I found was actually quite fascinating. First off, again, looking at the Pokemon in question, you would think it to be a aggressive type of Pokemon. It's black, it's shooting out light, which, again, Pokemon Sun and Moon was originally Pokemon Project Rainbow, and there are two prisms in its hands that shoot out light in different colors. Makes sense. The predominant colors you see in the picture are red, green, blue, and yellow. Again, don't believe that to be a coincidence. And also, if you look at the face, you will see that it has 6 different colored triangles on its face and different colors for the eyes. Again, primarily red, blue, green, and yellow. Coincidence? I believe not. Now, aside from that, Mars is often seen as a very masculine planet, a very masculine entity. What do you get from this Pokemon's design? Power and masculinity. You also have another primary meaning for Mars: war. This thing looks like it is battle-born, that it goes in head first and just wrecks everything. And in war, wouldn't you want things like that to be a part of your units? So, there's also other things. Well, before I get to the next part, another thing alchemically is Mars is being... How am I going to word this? Mars is affiliated with the substance iron, a very hard, very strong material. And of course, iron is used to symbolize hardness, force, and strength. You look at this thing, and you think that it is a metal body. Maybe a body of iron, of steel. So, hardness, force, and strength does fit this thing very well. Excuse me. I just finished a video from earlier. Alright. And also, I don't have many thoughts about this part yet, but it's also stated that iron is the fourth process in reaching philosophical and spiritual gold. So, I didn't look into that very much, so I don't know how many levels in process there are into reaching physical and, not physical, but philosophical and spiritual gold. So, fourth, I don't know how high is up there, but I know it's pretty up there. Now, aside from that, there are other things that Mars is affiliated with. And this goes back to Gen 6, along with the upcoming Gen 7. Mars is often stated to be confrontation of life and death issues. Confront life and death issues. Life and death. Xerneas and Yveltal. Again, all these Pokemon are pretty much coming all as one. And there's also another thing that Mars is said to be. It is said to be influential in illuminating vision. It is said that Gen 7 is going to be big. It is going to reveal something. And what better Pokemon to reveal it with than a Pokemon whose origin is influential in illuminating vision? Again, coincidence. And then let's go astrologically. We're moving away from alchemy a bit and going into the more astrological forces at hand. Mars is associated with the sign Aries, which is a spring sign, and it is usually affiliated with new beginnings, birth, and initiation. I could not read my own handwriting for a minute. Wow, professionalism at its finest. But yes, new beginnings, birth, initiation. Again, this series is said to be big, and a lot of people, like I said, Noggin and Logston, say that it is the end of the first portion of Pokemon, and that this is going to be the birth of the next version, which, again, this fits. There's also another thing. It is also the ruler of Scorpio, which is a fall sign, is representation of retreat, death, and submerging. Again, new beginnings, birth, initiation, retreat, death, and submerging are all represented by Mars. It has also been stated that Mars, astrologically, is natural rhythms of life and death. We are going back to life and death again. The Gen 6 legendaries. And Mars is also stated to be honest with ourselves, to confront our deepest, darkest secrets, and has been stated to be the driving a spike through the understanding of the heart of shadows, of our shadows. Pretty much narrowed down to revealing the truth behind the veil. Again, what Mars pretty much means, both alchemically, philosophically, spiritually, astrologically, it is life, death, confrontation, and the reveal of secrets, both of everything and of ourselves. What better beginning of a legendary than this? A Pokemon that is both symbolic of life and death, of new beginnings, and of the end. It is also stated that, again, it is a spring sign, but its greatest power regarding spiritualism and alchemy is fall. When does Pokemon Sun and Moon release? It releases later this month in November, towards the end of fall. Fall is usually seen as the end of half of the end of the year leading into winter. And then winter gets revitalized back with spring. And then it begins the year all anew from there. So, again, all of this fits perfectly well with both Gen 6 and Gen 7. Life, death, the sun, the moon, and order. All of those things being brought together and then accumulated with MARSHADOW. The Pokemon I believe to be represented by Mars. It could be the Eclipse. I could just be completely wrong here. Again, this is just a theory. But if I'm right, then MARSHADOW is a much more important Pokemon than previously believed. Again, I've looked into it, and so far, things do fit. Of course, there are holes here and there, but again, they're so minor that even if proven wrong, doesn't really take away from the overall idea. So, that is what I believe, that MARSHADOW isn't an eclipse, but Mars itself. And plus, again, it fits alchemically because Mars is a part of our solar system. It does have relevancy, and it does align with the sun, the moon, and Earth. So, that's pretty much all I have. Again, I've stated my points. I do believe this to be viable. Now, my question is, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you have things to add to it? Because so far, I believe that this is a very sound idea. Could be wrong, but a very sound idea nonetheless. But we shall see soon in Pokemon Sun and Moon. That's going to be out soon. I cannot wait for it. So this is the Mad King Paradox S signing off, and I still believe that MARSHADOW could be Mars.